Hello, welcome to lesson 1.1 of APUS History Mindsets. Today, we will be exploring the early colonization of the New World, which covers the years 1491 to 1607. Now, this period set the foundation for European exploration, Native American encounters, and the early settlement efforts that shaped the future of the Americas. So we're going to start with Native American societies. We have three key points here. First part, diverse cultures developed across North America. Now, before European arrival, millions of Native Americans lived in highly diverse societies. These range from the mound-building Mississippians in the Midwest to the cliff-dwelling Puebloans in the Southwest. Our second key point, advanced societies like the Mississippians, Puebloans, and Iroquois. Their economies were based on farming, hunting, and gathering, which were often influenced by the environments they inhabited. This ties in well with our third point, adapted to local environments, farming, or with especially maize, hunting, and gathering. Maize cultivation spread from Mexico to North America, transforming societies by enabling larger and more complex settlements. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about how these Native Americans came to be. Most historians believe that Native Americans are the descendants of migrants who came from Asia and North America via a land bridge from Siberia to Alaska. This this bridge was eventually submerged, which formed the Bering Strait. These people eventually migrated south, either by boat or maybe an ice-free corridor east of the Rocky Mountains, which went on to populate the Americas as we know today. Moving on to point number 2, European motivations for explorations. Our key points, gold, God, and glory. Now, this followed a lot of economic gain, religious conversion, and national prestige took place during this era. European nations were driven by a desire for wealth, religious expansion, and competition for national prestige, which was summarized as gold, God, and glory. Now, there was also a large desire for trade routes to Asia. That was the whole reason Columbus crossed the ocean and eventually ended up in the Americas. There are also many technological advances during this time period, such as the compass, caravel, and improved maps. The fall of Constantinople in 1453 disrupted traditional trade routes, making maritime exploration critical for assessing Asian markets. And thanks to these advances, these alternative voyages became possible. We're going to move on a little bit more about Christopher Columbus and the Spanish Empire. So our key points, 1492 was Columbus's voyage under Spain. He set sail, believing that he could find a westward route to Asia, but instead he reached the Caribbean, marking the beginning of sustained European contact with the Americas. This also initiated the Columbian Exchange, which was the widespread exchange of plants, animals, foods, communicable diseases, and even ideas. Now, Columbus arrived at a time when Europe had the resources and technology to establish colonies far from home, which is a colony is a territory settled and controlled by a foreign power. When Columbus returned to Spain and reported the existence of a rich new world with easy-to-subjugate natives, he opened the door to a long period of European expansion and colonialism. Keep in mind, the Americas were not the only colonies of Europe. But that's for another course. So, for a long time, Spain was the colonial power in the Americas. Conquistadors collected and exported as much of the area's wealth as they could. Under Spain's encomienda system, the crown granted colonists authority over a specified number of natives. The colonist was obliged to protect those natives and convert them to Catholicism. In exchange, the colonist was entitled to those natives' labor for such enterprises as sugar harvesting and silver mining. Now, this also led to a lot of intermingling amongst the Europeans and the Native Americans, and even Africans later on, which led to the mestizos and the zambos. Now, mestizos, you'll more likely see information about mestizos over zambos on the APUSH exam. Mestizos are those of mixed European and Native American blood. Zambos are those of mixed African and Native American blood. There was a racial caste system, like a hierarchy pyramid. Europeans were at the top, then mestizos, then zambos, and then full-blooded Africans were at the bottom of the pyramid. Moving on to the Columbian Exchange. This is one of the biggest points of this era. Now, the Columbian Exchange, as I said, was the exchange of plants, animals, communicable diseases, and ideas. This was between the Old and the New Worlds, as it was called. For example, Europeans brought wheat, horses, and smallpox to the Americas, while native crops like maize and potatoes revolutionized European diets. There's a couple examples there. This had profound demographic and cultural effects. This exchange reshaped ecosystems, economies, and populations globally with both positive and devastating consequences. Moving on to how some of the other European powers entered the New World and the influence they had. Now, starting with Portugal, there was the Treaty of Tordesillas in 1494, which eventually led to the establishment of Brazil. The Portuguese mostly focused on Brazil. They didn't do much in the Northern Americas. It was mostly South America. Now, French explorers focused on trade, especially in furs, and they formed alliances with native groups like the Huron. Samuel de Champlain there. Now, England attempted settlement with the Roanoke, famously disappearing, but these failures informed later success at Jamestown in 1607. And as we know today, they later became the dominating power. Now, the final major European power is the Netherlands. They mostly had trade-focused settlements and the Hudson River exploration. But keep in mind, during this time period, Spain dominated. So now we're going to look at some of the impact on native populations. So because of these diseases from the Columbian Exchange, such as smallpox, there were some areas seeing up to a 90% mortality rate from these diseases. They were completely devastating. In fact, these diseases were more devastating than any physical conflicts, weapons, technology that either side may have used. In fact, you may think that technology was the main strength that Europeans had against the Native Americans, but it is actually believed that the technology the Native Americans had was superior, that it was the diseases that wiped them out. Now, I mentioned this before, the encomienda system and just general slavery forced Native Americans into labor systems, exploiting them in agriculture and mining. There was a lot of displacement and resistance, such as the Pueblo Revolt. Native groups resisted colonization through revolts, and they tried to maintain their cultural traditions. The Pueblo Revolt did temporarily expel the Spanish. Now, there are some other conflicts during this time period, such as the decline of the Huron Confederacy, Metacomet's War, the Chickasaw Wars, and so on. Moving on to cultural exchange and conflict. There was a lot of cultural blending, as I mentioned, creating these mestizo populations, especially in Latin America. New cultures emerged from European, native, and African interactions, especially in these areas. This is where religion became a major role during this time. Christian missionaries sought to convert native peoples, often clashing with indigenous beliefs. There was not a lot of agreement. This created a lot of conflict and violent clashes over land and resources as well. The competition for land and resources led to these violent clashes, and this set a pattern of tension that would continue into later centuries, such as some of the conflicts I mentioned previously. Adding on, there's like Powhatan Wars, the Pequot War, Beaver Wars. Moving on to the legacy of early colonization. There is a large establishment of European dominance in the Americas, as we already mentioned. And there were strong foundations for transatlantic trade and later Atlantic slave trade. This early colonization laid the foundation for these slave trades. However, there were lasting effects on the native cultures and the European economies. These native societies were completely transformed by disease, displacement, and cultural exchange. Now, some of these future impacts, the systems of governance and economic exploitation established during this time, shaped the colonial period and beyond. Going on to review our key themes. Here, impact of the Columbian Exchange, transformation of native societies, European rivalries shaping the New World, and the roots of future colonial systems from 1607 onwards are our four major themes. So, remember the interconnectedness of exploration, cultural exchange, and conflict during this period. It is crucial for understanding the later units in APUS history. That concludes 1.1. Now, as a reminder, I do not cover every point that you should know. This is a general overview. This is not a substitute. Have a good day and keep on studying.